I did not like The Monkey.
I did not care for The Godfather.
I'm a really big Stephen King fan. Right now, you're sitting on a pile of books, and one of them is a first edition of Needful Things that I was gifted, which is like a prized possession of mine. And my favorite book used to be Misery. I think all throughout high school, that was my favorite book. So The Monkey from 2025 by Osgood Perkins is actually based on a short story that was in Stephen King's Skeleton Crew book of short stories. I actually have not read this entire collection, but I specifically read the monkey part and watched and listened to a lot of people's reviews on that, and like I just really digested the actual story for this video to try and compare and contrast the two and see if I liked it any more than I liked the movie. So spoilers for the Monkey film and the short story, and I'm going to just do a quick synopsis of what actually happens in the movie. The Monkey is a horror comedy. I actually think it's much more of a comedy than it is a horror, and I am not loving this trend of movies saying that they're horror movies and they're kind of not. Don't really love it. So it follows two twin brothers, Hal and Bill, and when they were younger, their estranged dad left them a toy monkey who, when you turn it, it causes random acts of violence that lead to death. So then it like goes over 25 years later when one of the brothers has a son. They get up to some quirky antics and they're trying to stop the evil twin brother who's made it his life mission to control this monkey because he believes that his brother killed their mom with the monkey. So the end is really kind of ominous and weird, and they get the monkey, find it, and then there is a school bus full of dead cheerleaders, and then one of the horsemen of the apocalypse shows up and starts walking across the street. I usually would go into more detail on the plot in a video like this, but genuinely, I don't know what else to say. It's mostly bits. Like the movie is mostly made up of bits and then deaths, kind of back and forth. And that's kind of reductive to the movie because there are good things about it, but there's no real reason to go into a lot of the plot here, at least right now. And Osgood Perkins, it's really funny because he's not a director that I follow, if that makes sense. Like I don't really follow every one of his releases and then like make sure that I'm catching them opening night most of the time, but he's so popular and he's so big and being platformed right now that I just end up making videos on every one of his movies. So Osgood Perkins, along with a few other people, made this adaptation. I'm going to be as kind as I can because I really love indie cinema. I don't know how indie this is at this point, but I do love it. I love horror movies. I love making movies that are just kind of violent for the sake of being violent. I'm not against that. I don't want to just make this a hater video because I feel like I do that a lot, but I did not like it. I actually was very mad, and I'm feeling myself getting frustrated when I'm talking about it right now. Everybody dies and that's life is the official quote for the movie. It's like kind of the meaning of the movie, and you see it on posters and Instagram ads, and everywhere there's promo for this movie, you see everybody dies and that's life. So it quite literally is telling you what the film means before you step into the theater. I think this is a really interesting thing because I've not seen this type of marketing done in films before, with horror films specifically, where the deeper message of the movie is just on the promos. Like it's begging not to be taken seriously, and it's like begging to be enjoyed. And I'm a sucker for a beautifully designed horror campaign. That's seriously one of my favorite things about horror in general, is I think the graphic design and the art direction of horror movies is the best. Like I think it is really good. But my opinion is this is just the first of a lot of missteps that lead this movie to come across to me as really arrogant. And I just think this movie hides behind style and self-awareness in a way that is, first of all, super contradictory, and we'll get to that, but it's, again, like it's just really frustrating. Yes, this movie is playing with horror tropes in a really meta way. Like it's playing with like violence and like funny characters and horror comedies, and it's playing with that in a really like meta way, like self-aware way. But what is the point of this? Everybody dies and that's life. That's the theme of the movie. But what's the point of making this film at all? When I watch films, I look for something that I can find in it that maybe the director was trying to convey, or like something that I can connect with the director on, but I just couldn't find anything. And I just think there's an identity issue here with the film. The Monkey puts itself on a pedestal of being something so obvious and so meta that it transcends other horror films that try to be artsy about death. Cue Hereditary, A24 films, just horror movies that try to be really deep about things. Like, this movie is quite obviously a jab at that, and when you watch it you do feel that, because the minute you try and kind of see something deeper, there is quite literally nothing there. Like, Neon and Osgood Perkins are like launching like a playful jab at A24 with this movie. It's even in their satire of the A24 shop that they did here, like on Instagram, they made like a post. It was like an ad of A24 candles and like talking about what's the point of that, and the candle smells like death and like blood and violence. But Neon does sell merch too. Like, they sell just as much merch as A24 does. So they're trying to make this like commentary on consumerism, but it doesn't really work because they're doing the exact same thing. And I think that's what is happening with this movie's identity. I think it's just a total fucking mess. The Monkey is so funny and silly, and like there's a poop joke in it. Like, it's so silly. Like, I really thought it was funny, but it's so comedic and so thinly developed as far as characters go, and plot doesn't really make sense. Actually, like, there's a lot of things that are really thin. And usually I wouldn't take like personal offense to a movie that is just not taking itself seriously. I don't have a problem with that. Like, I enjoy shitty kind of horror movies that don't take themselves very seriously, that are just really fun to watch, and they're exciting and they're very violent. Nothing wrong with that. Like, there's nothing wrong. Obviously, a huge part of the horror genre is appreciating those types of movies. But the major problem is The Monkey doesn't even play into its own message and shuts down conversations about it right away. One of my absolutely favorite things about media, and like the point of me even making this video and like enjoying making this video, is that I just love the way that film sparks conversations. And like, even if it's a silly conversation, I like to discuss things with people that I never would have A, come up with myself, or B, stumbled into on conversation with someone. They also take you out of your own perspective, which I think is just really valuable, and just get you out of your own head, which is like escapism. That's fun, but it's really nice to be in someone else's shoes and to kind of see what their life is like. That's nice. But The Monkey kind of shuts down any kind of discussion or conversation about itself. And I think, my opinion is, I think when they made this, they were thinking that that was really cool, that they thought this was a cool move to do this with this movie. Because being a director now is very cool. And you're also avoiding seeing contemporary horror movies because they're shitty and you only watch small ones. Like, it's a little bit pretentious, and I think making this really expensive film about nothing is not cool. I think that they thought that it would be cool. And that sounds presumptuous, and I know. It's just the vibe that I get, I guess. The movie itself shields itself from critique by being flippant. Like, it is so, like, it's trying to be uncritiquable. Like, they can't cancel me. I do not get canceled. I don't care about it. But like, when you say stuff like that, you're going to get canceled and you're going to care about it, because you're trying so hard to make everyone think you don't care, but you care a little bit. The quote, "everybody dies and that's life," like the branding, the themes for this movie, is kind of an homage to how in all slashers and horrors, there's a lot of gratuitous violence. It's kind of boiling all horror down to one statement. And I'm not mad at the statement. Like, it's eerie and it gets you thinking kind of about your own mortality in a way that's scary. I don't mind that. But the Monkey's own characters are so goddamn stupid and thin and very, very 2D, that the adage it's trying to like make into this creepy kind of thing is meaningless. Because if you don't develop your characters, their deaths have no meaning. And when you're constantly just bringing in zany side characters just to kill them off, it's like that has so little meaning to the audience. I was so bored. Every time someone died, I was like, oh my God. And that sounds morbid, but I think the really great horror films that are truly scary or truly impactful, like, have such good writing that deaths have impact, even if it's silly. Even in Zombieland, that's like obviously like not the best movie of all time, but even with those characters, they're silly and they're thinly developed, but you care about them in a way that you care if they're gonna die and you are getting excited because you think they might survive. This movie is flat. Like, it's almost like it took out the pretentious things that it thought was pretentious, and they did that by acting pretentious and taking out the things they thought were like too artsy. And then all that's left is this really thin plot that's boring. Like, it's literally boring. And that's reading a lot into a horror comedy. I know that, but if the movie was really trying to make the message that death is random, which it is, it would stand on its own two legs and make those deaths mean something and make its characters difficult to kill emotionally. Like, it would at the very least, death is meaningless in this universe. It's truly meaningless. I didn't even care about the main actor. Like, I genuinely didn't care. And when the kills lose their potency, again, it's just fucking boring to watch. One of my favorite films of all time is called Mandy. It has this kind of same theme going on, that death and violence is chaotic and random. And it also makes fun of a lot of horror tropes in a way that's really meta and quite kind of silly. Mandy also has some really creative kills, along with major satire of the horror genre. But the pretty much fundamental difference between these two films is that Mandy develops its characters a lot, so the kills really do mean something and they kind of drive the entire movie forward. And it has an impact, like death has an impact in its unfairness and its randomness. And it uses absurdity to enhance this theme instead of using absurdity as some kind of critique shield. I just think The Monkey was really underdeveloped in this way. And you might be thinking, maybe it doesn't want a YouTube video made about it. Maybe that's the whole point. Maybe it's just to have fun and to watch something. Maybe it doesn't want a pseudo-intellectual online to talk about it. Like, you might be thinking that. Maybe it is begging me not to do that. But I will say, to that point, the film and the marketing might be begging you one thing, begging you to not take it seriously, to just go in and have fun. Death has no meaning, kind of go in and like just have a good time. But the production design and the visual aspect of this movie begs itself to be taken seriously. You have these photo shoots that are really quite serious. It being shot so beautifully with such a detailed look at the monkey and like that puppet or whatever is so gorgeous. A lot of detail and care was put into that. The way it's directed is literally begging for analysis. It's shot like an artsy horror movie, and it's visually looks like an artsy horror movie. And at the very end of the movie, right when people are thinking about what they're going to rate it on Letterboxd, there's a horseman of the apocalypse that just shows up out of nowhere, literally begging for people to say, what was that? On Letterboxd, they're begging you to do that. So there's nothing to analyze, but then it's like contradicting itself, because if it truly was just the silly hit of the winter time, like if it was just a silly slasher, it wouldn't be so serious in so many different ways. Like, it wouldn't have these serious long talks about it. And like, there's like a vintage Goosebumps poster in the boys' room when they're young, and it's like someone sourced that. It looks so good. There's a lot of detail on things that they thought was undeniably cool, like cinematography, undeniably cool, like awesome visuals and like really good practical effects. Those things are undeniably cool. Like, we know that. But analysis and a deeper kind of meaning that makes sense, that's not cool. How are you going to pick and choose what aspects of like modern artsy cinema you think are good enough to include in your movie and then kind of shit on the rest of them? Make your characters one-dimensional so their deaths have no meaning and they're just set up for some kind of joke at the end. And I just think the visuals of this film belonged in something so much better. And that's why I disliked it so much. I think if this were shot kind of like an early 2000s horror comedy, I would respect it a lot more. It is insane for me to say that the Y2K horror comedy characters were more developed than this movie's characters when they look that different. Like when you see a still from the monkey, you're expecting to have something to analyze because there's so much care put into this production design. When you look at a still from Y2K, it's very, very obvious that's a comedy. It's not shot like it's Hereditary. It's like this movie is making fun of Hereditary, but it has every one of the Hereditary elements except for the writing and except for the characters. I don't really know if the film is hypocritical or if it's just ineffective in its message, but I just didn't like it. I did laugh, and there was a few times I genuinely laughed, and there was a few times I was genuinely impressed. Again, gorgeous movie, but it doesn't excuse my boredom. It doesn't excuse my boredom. I was very bored and I was kind of frustrated. That was my slightly rude review of the movie. I was thinking right when I finished the film, I can't wait to kind of read what Stephen King has to say about this because maybe there's something deeper here. But spoiler alert, there's not. It's literally the exact same issue except different. The short story is grasping to try and make itself more than 4 paragraphs so hard that making that really small amount of information into a giant movie, it was never going to work. And I don't know why they chose this story. I can't even understand. A lot of critics agree like this short story by Stephen King is so lengthy when the actual things that happen are they're quite condensed. The short story is really similar to the movie in a lot of ways, like the father disappearing and leaving something behind, the monkey, like it is the same story in a lot of ways. And in King's biography, he literally says that he got the idea for finding this monkey because him and his brother dug through his estranged father's stuff. So it is like basically what happened in King's real life is what happens in the short story and the movie. And then when he was digging through his father's stuff, he found his first Lovecraft book, and that kind of started him on a journey. And then his father was also writing horror stories and submitting them to magazines. And back in the day, you could only submit your book to like pulp magazines if it was a horror book or a horror short story, because the pulp magazines were the only ones that were risque enough to actually put it into print. So that's a fun fact. So the original short story was published around 1980 in a nudie mag, because that was, again, like kind of back in the day. This is after the pulp magazine era, but the only place where you could get your horror novel published was in like a nudie mag or something like that because it was explicit. So here are like the rapid fire differences between the book and the movie. In the short story, the monkey's murders are subtle and they happen at a distance, and the deaths include a dog. And in the film, the deaths are really exaggerated and absurdly very, very violent. I do think it's creepier that the deaths were kind of distant in the short story because you didn't know if it was corresponding to the monkey's cymbals clapping. But in the film, it's very obvious. The minute that the monkey's done drumming, there is a death. And I think that takes away a lot of creepiness of it. I do think that Osgood Perkins stumbles upon creepy moments accidentally, and when he tries too hard to make them happen, they lose their scare factor. The climax of the short story is Hal realizes the monkey's never going to stop killing. He decides he must destroy it, and he throws it in a lake. And the next day, the lake is full of dead fish. And that basically confirms to him that the monkey was evil, because he actually didn't really still know. Even as an adult, he didn't really know if it was evil. And then in the film, the climax is really violent, and like the two brothers duke it out. One of the brothers dies, and then Hal and his son drive off into the sunset, meet the horsemen. So it's a lot more violent and a lot more absurd. One quote I really did like in the short story was Stephen King wrote this quote, and it was like, "The wind can whistle, but it can never carry a tune." And I think that's a more kind of artistic, poemy version of everyone dies and that's life, just because like the wind can whistle but can never carry a tune. Like we can personify death and make it seem less random than it really is. Like it's not really making music, it just seems like it is. It seems like it's more predictable than it is, and we kind of put that on death to make us feel better. I like that better than what the monkey kind of did with it. But I will say, not Stephen King's best work. I thought it was a little bit offensive. I thought it was a bit racist, to be honest. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. I just think it was insensitive in the way that it described people, and then also there is the N-word in it. I don't, like, it was because a racist character said it, and I know he does that in some of his other books, but it seemed a tad unnecessary in this short story specifically because there was no kind of racial commentary or like racism commentary, so why are you adding that in there? It could have been to show that Hal's family is like racist or something, but then what's the point? But the craziest thing about the short story and the film is that the Toy Story chimpanzee is scarier than both. Literally, I'm so disappointed in both of these medias that like I'm more scared of this chimpanzee than I am of any of the aspects of the film or the novel. And that's not what I expected this video to be like. I kind of expected me to read the book and have something to say about it and something that I thought it was better than the film, but I think they're both like really bad. And that's like unfortunate because I want them to be good. I'm not preying on their downfall. I go into things expecting to like them always. And so it is disappointing. But again, totally my opinion. I did not go to film school. I don't know anything. So if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. That's all I have for my review about The Monkey. And if you watched to the end, thank you for watching. Love you so much. I am sorry that I disappeared. I'm having seasonal depression. That, and I had a lot of plans for this time that didn't work out because of things outside of my control. And it's hard because I had my heart set on things that did not happen. And it's just like, life is way harder than I thought it was going to be, to be honest. When I was growing up, I literally thought it was going to be 13 going on 30 every day. So it's harder than that. And also I'm literally fighting with a brand. So there's a lot of stressful things going on, and I really do apologize that, first of all, the podcast hasn't been posted in like 2 months. We're working on it. It's just like, so it's busyness and then it's like life stuff, but it's not abandoned. And then my apartment tour should be out like really soon after this video because I'm editing them at the same time. Yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. I really do appreciate everybody who comments and stuff. Like, I love to hear what you say. Even if I don't respond, I really do try and read everything because it's so special to me that I'm sparking you to think about something or even disagree with me. Like, just that's really important and special to me, is talking about media in ways that make us all learn more. Thank you very much, and I'm gonna see you very soon, and I hope you have a great night, or I don't know who's watching this in the day. Okay, peace.